I'm Dr. Duke with the New American, and today I'm joined by Christian Gomez, Research Project Manager for the John Birch Society. Christian, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Glad to be on.
Well, it's kind of a dark day, I think, for people who really value the Constitution, value American sovereignty. We have a situation where, to the delight of all rhinos and Democrats, the USMCA was signed today. Talk about what the USMCA is, and give us a little background on what the treaty says.
Yeah, the USMCA is a 2,410-page agreement signed between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada that it's intended to replace the original 1994 NAFTA agreement, but in reality, it builds on NAFTA, as Chrystia Freeland, Canada's Deputy Prime Minister, has said, and expands into other areas like environment and energy, sectors that NAFTA didn't deal with, and it's another step towards the integration of the continent in the direction of a North American Union.
One thing that's so shocking about this treaty is that, like you just said, people who don't know any better think this is just about buying and selling and making it easier for goods to flow back and forth between North America, right? Mexico, Canada, and the United States. But as you rightly pointed out, they're going to start regulating environmental issues. So in other words, this treaty's got dictates and set-asides and things that we're supposed to aim for that now a committee, not the U.S. Congress, gets to vote on, right?
That's correct. Chapter 30 establishes the creation of a free trade commission, and that would essentially be a regulatory body, an administrative body for the USMCA for the entire North American continent. So that body would regulate the implementation of the agreement and would regulate the various sectors of the economy and so forth, including things that don't relate to the economy, like environment and so forth.
So, for instance, this commission now, this committee that will have representatives of Mexico, Canada, and the United States, will have authority to set emissions limits, potentially, in America without Congress having a say in it.
That's potentially true. In fact, the Chapter 24, which is the environment chapter, they added, the Democrats snuck this into the USMCA back in December. They added 7 multilateral environmental agreements and a clause that in the future, other environmental agreements could be added and be binding through the USMCA. For example, the Democrats, they wanted the Paris Accord to be put in there. The administration, fortunately, did not allow that to be put in there. But hey, we get another president come in the White House, and then they could put that in, or some other future UN environmental accord.
I get why swamp creatures, I get why globalists want this. But I think for our listeners, it might be a little bit confusing why Donald Trump does. And so this is the same Donald Trump who is applauding the Brits for getting out of Brexit. This is the same Donald Trump who said to the British people, to the United Kingdom, get out and let's work together on trade. Why then is he so keen to get us back in something that is pretty much like NAFTA on steroids?
Every time Trump talks about the USMCA, to me it seems clear that he doesn't really know what's exactly in it. It's the same few positive points about better access for dairy and car manufacturing being made in North America, and how that helps American workers, along with workers from Canada and Mexico too. But he doesn't seem to focus on the issues that we've brought up, which to me says he hasn't really seen this, because once you open the USMCA and look through it, it's pretty obvious that stuff's in there. My belief is that he has been blindsided about what's in this by his U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, who's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, an organization established in 1921 dedicated to world government, and he has been on the phone regularly with his predecessor, Michael Froman, who was Obama's trade rep, who was responsible for the TPP. So when you have someone like Lighthizer from the CFR, we're collaborating with fellow CFR colleague Froman, plus the Canadian and Mexicans who were involved in negotiating it. They also negotiated the TPP. I mean, the deck was stacked against us from the beginning, and President Trump needs to look at the text of the USMCA because it's the same old NAFTA plus TPP.
I mean, given that Donald Trump can't read everything, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say this. Our federal government has become so bloated.
Well, no president can read everything.
I mean, that's the thing. And yet we're engaging in these kinds of agreements that are stripping away American sovereignty. They are compromising American independence. They are getting around the American voter, right? Because this committee now can tell American voters what they can and can't do, what they can't buy and sell in certain ways, how trade's going to go. And there's nothing we can do as American citizens to vote this out, ultimately, once it's signed, and given the powers that it's been granted. So Donald Trump can't read all of this. Is there anybody else in his administration does anybody else see it beside Lighthizer? I mean, where is there? Is this one of those things that goes directly from the negotiating of Lighthizer to the president? I mean, I get why the Congress was so willing to do it. They're controlled by the Democrats, but why the U.S. Senate? With a slight majority of Republicans in the U.S. Senate, were there no senators who stood up and talked against this?
It seems like almost all the senators seem to be rhinos or globalists. I don't want to say every senator. There's a few good ones there, but I can't explain why even the good ones voted for this. They just must not be aware of what's in it. But on the House side, Massey and Ted Yoho, Congressman, they voted against it. They saw what was in here. Even Amash of Michigan, he tweeted the day that it passed in the House that this is how Trump had opposed TPP, called it the worst thing, and NAFTA called it the worst thing, and then you add the two together to get USMCA, and now it's the greatest thing. So he saw it.
For the record, how many Republicans in Congress did not vote for this?
Only 2 in the House of Representatives, and that was it.
See, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, that's a staggering number. And I've never understood this. Why, when you've got the most radical liberal Democrats in the House and the Senate who have signed on to this, why that would not give pause to
That's exactly right.
So-called Republican and conservative politicians.
You have Democrats they were even saying this from the floor of the Senate and the House, that they've never voted for a trade agreement in the past, even under Clinton and Obama, and now they're voting for this. I mean, that in itself says a lot about what's in this agreement. Why do the progressives, who even some of them oppose some of Obama and Clinton stuff, but they're on board with this one? That raises a huge red flag.
It's exactly like the con, isn't it? The push to a constitutional convention. It's exactly this again, right? That you have more and more Republicans coming around to the idea to calling an Article 5 convention, and either they don't realize or they're not interested in the fact that you've got some really nasty, radical, anarchist, globalist liberals who are pushing the same thing.
I think people just want a quick solution without realizing the ramifications of those decisions.
What can the American people do now that this is signed into law? What would you recommend? What would be the way to fight this?
Well, we have to get out of the USMCA. And the USMCA Chapter 34 has a little paragraph about withdrawing, how you have to send like a 6-month notice or so to the other countries to withdraw from it. So we can withdraw at any point. So what needs to be done is the House and Senate need to pass a resolution calling for the U.S. withdrawal and termination of membership in the USMCA, and also withdrawal from NAFTA, so that doesn't fall back into place. And then the president would need to sign that. So we need to continue educating Congress about the USMCA, because they clearly haven't gotten it for the last year and a half and 2 years. The education efforts have to continue so more and more congressmen can wake up to this.
I mean, it is discouraging in the sense that you have a Republican majority in the Senate and hundreds of Republicans in the Congress who voted with this, and now you've got a president who has been a stand-up guy on some of these issues. Like you said, the only way it makes sense to me is that he hasn't read it. That he doesn't know what much of what it says means. And again, that's not unusual. He's not the first president. God knows Barack Obama didn't read any part of Obamacare before he was touting it. Yet, what's the next step for the president, do you think? How do we let him know that we're unhappy with what he's done?
We need to keep messaging the White House and sending messages to the president. I just want to say, if there's time, when the League of Nations was being proposed by President Woodrow Wilson, a Republican Senate totally rejected it, thank God. At the end of World War II, we entered the United Nations. Unfortunately, only 2 Republican U.S. senators, if I recall correctly, only 2 senators voted against entry into that. And now with USMCA, there were no Republicans who opposed entry into that.
So in any way, in coming around full circle, Christian, we come to the realization that there aren't really 2 parties in Washington.
There's one globalist party in control.
And I think that's the takeaway from this, and it explains so much about what's happening in American politics today. You do not have really a competing Republican and Democrat party. They are much more lockstep than they're not. Christian Gomez, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.